Alright, this is a film to try to explain construction, erection, and installation of the wood truss, this curved semi-hammer beam style wood truss for the project. This is more or less what it would look like when it was complete, except of course this grain wouldn't be running diagonally, and we will have to have a turnbuckle to hold this structure together. So beginning from the ground up, we have the 6x8 columns, 6x6 columns, and the beams down below, and the decking on top of that, and then our next central 6x8 columns, which are notched to receive our lookout beams, the main roof beams here. There will be some sort of hardware. I don't think it'll be that piece, but it'll be some sort of hardware there. And then we have the roof beams, the lookout beams, that are also notched to key into this here, like that. Notice there's a little hole here as well, and those will go there, probably with some straps to hold them on, just hold everything together. And so we have this as a starting point for our bearing condition. These beams up here probably be closer to this. It's a little block because this is just 2 members and this is 3, and these are 6.5 inch or 5.5 inch deep columns here. So that's just getting ready for the rest. This is the ridge beam where the main load is going to be coming down through this truss. Somehow it's to get carried from the end of this down to here and back to the wall and back to these columns. So my guess is that that beam is put up in advance, and some sort of temporary blocking is put in for that, just to keep that in place, because the rest of this would be, my assumption is that the rest of this roof framing would be constructed before this truss even arrives on the site or is built on the site, or whatever ends up happening. So for now though, we'll back out that, but we'll assume that that's going to be in place. We'll back that out for now so that we can see exactly what's happening, including the temporary support. That's going to be in place, but we'll just get rid of it for now. And so then there's going to be some sort of hardware at this beam. Now here at the beginning I show a saddle, but a little later in the film I'm hoping maybe that's done a different way. So that's, you know, a saddle. In the future part of the film I get rid of this saddle part here, wondering if that can't be gotten rid of and just have a flanged bracket on each side, considering the rest of the structure that happens down below. But trying to go along here and see. So the rest of the structural part that holds it all together is those brackets or saddle at the top, and then some truss plates. I'm sure that these are oversized, but they are just showing what the idea is here. And then these end plates, which end up at the end of the main upper chords of the truss. Right. And then a turnbuckle to hold everything together at the bottom. And these vertical rods here are what is presumably going to try to hold the truss down to our lookout beams. So looking at this view, there's your structural parts, or the steel parts anyway. And then we have these upper members. I'm showing them in fir, but they will actually be in the same reclaimed lumber as the rest of this stuff here, and a cross piece. So the 2 upper chords, and then this collar that comes across, and then I'm assuming some sort of a vertical piece like this. This has already been specified like this, And then looking at this closer, this is a two-piece arrangement here, and so those come together, and so that load comes down then on the collar and then out to these cords. And I'm not an engineer, so I don't know much about this, but this was just trying to get it put together. Alright, and so obviously the turnbuckle goes in almost at the very last, including those down rods. Those all go in at the very last. Before any of that happens, though, we begin, I'm going to take out the beam just so that, for clarity, but that beam would be in place. The truss is presumably constructed off-site or on-site, but not in place up there. And so the next thing that would happen in this construction, once these pieces were put together, then we clad that bottom collar with these pieces here, which come up and up. And this film will go back and forth a few times because, well, you'll see. And then we'll need some sort of drip cap or some sort of water protection from the top of that thing. And I'm just showing a formed piece of metal, aluminum, put down with butyl tape or whatever. And I guess probably, I don't know, it'll have to be flashed here as well. Now, the thing with these, this collar thing, they probably actually wouldn't be like that. Now this is the cladding that goes over and hides the truss plates, the rafters cladding. But see, probably wouldn't use these kind, but probably use something like this where it's cut a little bit to allow that rafter. See how that is? And that way the rafter can come down and interface better with that. But taking away those, because those are going to, I would think that those would be installed last. Even those will probably, those pieces will probably go on after the truss is installed. Now, I want to take a little break because instead of that saddle, I'm thinking it'd be better if we could get away without the saddle with just flanges like that. Considering we have this piece coming down here anyway, I'm not sure that that saddle is going to be needed. The engineering firm will tell us about that, I guess. But I'd like it to see it like this instead, so that we can kind of conceal this steel a little bit more when we put on the the rafter covers or whatever, the cord covers. But with or without those cord covers on or off, the next thing that would happen is these vertical pieces would go be installed, and these would be patterned for a person to cut, and then those pieces would go up, and then next I'm just taking away those valley rafters so that you can see a little bit better, and taking away the lookouts so we can see a little better. The next piece that goes in are these little short, and this is where the bearing comes down through this piece here to the lookout beams. Get a little closer here and you can see that that's drilled for the turnbuckle through here, and it's drilled for that vertical rod that comes down through the main upper cord, down through this vertical piece, and then down through the lookout beam. And I think I end up showing this a little better. Yeah, you can see that this is cord out here for the vertical rod. Take away that rafter and you can see it's cord like that, and that's the turnbuckle comes through at the end, at the very end, and there's the down rod, and this is how this is all kind of held together. Whether that's possible or not, I don't really know, but that's what we're hoping for. And then after that rod is put in, there's just these little caps put at the bottom, screwed over the bottom to make it look like there's a penetration. Okay, but so once these pieces are put in, and I'm assuming just screw construction up here, heavy screws. Whether that works or not, I don't know. But next are these Gothic arches, also would have been patterned and pre-cut, etc. And those fit up here. And you can see those are cored also for ultimately turnbuckle nuts and washers, etc. Here, just big long Simpson SDS screws or something like that could hold this all together on the ground before it's put up. And then once all those pieces are in, then obviously we have to put the turnbuckle in. You can see this is the end plate, whatever that's specified as. I mean, I'm showing everything like 1/4 inch thick here. These plates here also have to be, whatever they end up being, they have to be routed into this. We have to router out this main cord because we want those flat so that when those rafter covers go over it, it's not a headache getting it to cover that plate. But in terms of putting the turnbuckle in, then you know, the biggest headache there is, you can see it back here, it's in 3 pieces, the center piece and the left bar and the right bar, and those have to be all threaded through these nuts, which are not shown with holes, but those are nuts and washers, and so that goes through there, and then everything is tightened up like this and held together. Finally then, presumably, like as I said, that presumably is made on the ground, and so it's out here brought up. It's probably going to take a crane. I think it's going to be pretty heavy, but anyway, people or crane or whatever, it's brought up and hopefully slid in. Oh, I see. What am I doing up here? Well, there's that saddle. Presumably it's like this without the saddle, so it's like that, and then slides in and we're good to go. And once it's in, the vertical rods come down through, are bolted to the lookout beams, the caps are put on at the bottom, the rafter covers are put on. Just ignore this discrepancy up here, it's just an issue with the program. And the final kind of things that happen once that's in place, then these covers go on here, these horizontal pieces, and then largely decorative bolts, although they will perform some function. And then, you know, then the roof, which was already built, at least that much of the roof was built. And then once the truss is in place, then the tongue and groove can be nailed over it, and then some trim pieces and the regular roof constructed above that. After that's all done, the LVL beams down here can be covered with the vertical columns covering the rest of it. And then these are just decorative. I mean, they'll offer something with their, because they're going to be screwed up through here and screwed here, but largely those are decorative. These beams are sized to hold that without that little piece. And so then just add some walls and windows, doors, trees, and you're good to go. Alright, and then in the second part of the film, I'll try to run through the same process again, forward in a little bit more straightforward schematic kind of view, beginning from the start, with our beams, our main beams and our columns and our lookout beams in place. What we'll be looking for the engineering firm to specify is the size of these plates, what these hopefully flanged brackets at the top, whether a 1-inch diameter rod will be adequate here, the thickness of those plates. Of course, we'll provide all the dimensions and floor plans, etc. So the person constructing the truss then begins with those specifications, the flanges, and we'll have to have these parts probably made up somewhere. Pretty straightforward steel work. So they start with that, and they add their reclaimed lumber members. These are shown as 4x8s right now. Hopefully that will be adequate to do the job. So those are 4x8s. And then we put the collar in, which is about a 4x6 it looks like. The vertical piece, back pour that 2-piece vertical in the center. King post, maybe that's what it's called, but there it is, I suppose. And then really you could put the bolts through on that one even before you put the collar cladding on. Anyway, the cladding goes on next. This collar cladding here that slips up, a U shape, and then these two inner verticals would be kind of fastened. This is all presumably built on some sort of large flat table. Then the curved arch is mounted in there. Then these outer verticals, remember those outer verticals, they were drilled horizontally, which that could happen after the fact, but they're drilled cored vertically as well for those hold down rods. Then the Gothic arch portions are fastened in. Notice these Gothic, all of this drops slightly below this lookout beam here to lock that in. And then once those parts are together, then it's just assembling the turnbuckle at the bottom. You got your turnbuckle in the center, and then your rods out at the end, and your nuts would have to be in place as you go along. And that thing is threaded through all of those. It's a lot of thread work, but someone's got to do it. All put together, and the nuts tightened up, and your truss is completed and ready to install in place. So you slide it in underneath that main beam at the top. Then bring your rods down through, screw those up tight, put the caps on the bottom, and you're ready to do the final few pieces of work then on the truss, and that would be done in place, which would be the rafter covers, which these are 2x10 material here. The rafter covers, the low horizontals, the hardware, and then some trim and the rest of everything. And that's it. Go back through that in a hurry. Then you're back to scratch.